"Can I hold you while I sleep?" asked the alien child. The guards looked down. He had traveled far from his homeworld, drawn to this place by curiosity and the hope of adventure. The station was huge, bigger than any city he had ever seen, and full of beings from countless worlds. Humans, aliens of all shapes and sizes, and creatures he had only read about in history records all moved about the corridors, conducting their business in a bustling dance of commerce and politics. Kale was tired. His boots echoed lightly against the metal floor as he rounded a corner and paused. Something small and fragile caught his attention. At first, he thought it was a shadow, shifting unnaturally against the wall. Then he noticed the soft glow of pale skin and wide, luminous eyes peering at him. The figure was tiny, not more than half the height of a human adult, and it trembled as it crouched in the corner. Its skin shimmered faintly in the light, like soft moonlight reflecting on water. It looked alien, but somehow in its smallness and fear it seemed familiar. Kale slowed his approach, careful not to startle it. "Hey there," he said gently, trying to sound calm. "Are you okay?" The child froze, then blinked slowly. Its eyes were huge, round, and wet with unshed tears. It didn't speak at first, only observing Kale with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Kale noticed its tiny hands clutching the edges of its cloak, which was too big for its small frame. There were faint scars on its arms, pale lines that hinted at past injuries or hardships. The child's appearance told a story of survival, loneliness, and perhaps pain. Kale crouched down to meet its gaze at eye level. "You're alone?" he asked softly. The child hesitated. Then with a quiet nod, it whispered, "Yes." Its voice was thin, almost musical, and carried a sadness that pulled at Kale's heart. He could see it had been hiding here for a long time, waiting for anyone to notice it. Before Kale could speak again, a pair of guards appeared at the end of the corridor. They were tall, heavily armored, and moved with the strict precision of people trained to follow orders without question. Their helmets reflected the light and their weapons hung ready at their sides. Kale's heart raced. He had no doubt the guards would not approve of his interaction with the child. "Sir," one of the guards called out, voice harsh and mechanical, "step away from the alien." Kale's instincts told him to retreat, but he couldn't abandon the child. There was something in its eyes, something pleading and fragile that made him pause. The child looked up at him, trembling, and whispered softly, "Can I hold you while I sleep?" The words were so simple, so innocent, that even the guards hesitated. They had been trained to enforce rules and security protocols, not to deal with such raw emotion. The smallness of the child, combined with the vulnerability in its voice, forced everyone to pause. Kale felt a warmth spread through his chest. He reached out carefully, letting the child see that he meant no harm. "Of course," Kale said, smiling gently. "You can hold me." The child relaxed slightly, and Kale slowly moved closer, allowing it to climb into his arms. The guards remained at a distance, tense but uncertain how to proceed. Kale could feel the child's small body trembling against his chest. Its skin was cool but soft, and it clung to him with a desperate need for comfort. Kale felt an immediate sense of responsibility. He didn't know who the child was, where it came from, or why it was here alone, but he knew one thing: he had to protect it. He moved down the corridor, careful to avoid drawing attention, looking for a quiet place where the child could rest. The station was full of hidden nooks and small maintenance areas that humans rarely used. Kale guided the child into one of these spaces, a small room with a soft floor and dim lights. It wasn't much, but it was safe. The child curled into Kale's arms, burying its head against his chest. Kale gently stroked its back, trying to offer comfort through human touch. The alien child closed its eyes slowly, finally allowing itself to relax. For the first time in who knew how long, it felt safe. Kale sat with the child, listening to its quiet breathing. He realized that the child's species was unlike anything he had encountered. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and faint luminescent patterns moved across its skin, almost like a living language. Kale had no idea what the patterns meant, but they shifted gently as the child's breathing slowed, suggesting calmness and trust. Hours passed, and Kale stayed with the child, sharing stories of his travels in a low, soothing voice. He spoke of distant planets, human inventions, and the beauty of the stars beyond the station. Though the child didn't respond in words, it hummed softly, a sound like a faint melody, which Kale took as acknowledgement. As night cycles passed in the station, Kale realized he couldn't leave the child alone. The authorities might discover it, and the station was not safe for a lone alien child. He needed a plan, something that would protect the child without getting both of them into serious trouble. The next morning, Kale learned more about the child's situation from passing conversations. Station workers mentioned a recent alien crash landing on a distant sector, a mission gone wrong, and an orphaned child reported missing. Kale pieced together that the child was likely a survivor of this incident, left behind and considered a threat or anomaly by the station's authorities. It was not just vulnerable, it was endangered. Kale's determination strengthened. He could feel the child's small fingers tightening around his shirt as if sensing his resolve. There was an intelligence in those eyes, a silent plea that went beyond words. Kale understood then that this child had already experienced far too much suffering, and he could not let it face more. Days passed, and Kale adjusted to a routine. He would spend his waking hours helping the child hide from patrolling guards, providing food and water, and teaching small lessons about the human world. In return, the child would respond with subtle gestures, guiding Kale, warning him of dangers, and even communicating feelings through its luminous skin. They began to form a bond stronger than words, a connection that bridged species, culture, and language. The station began to notice. Some humans whispered about Kale's strange behavior, about the way he seemed to care for an alien child as if it were his own. A few sympathetic scientists and staff observed the child's intelligence and unusual abilities. Quiet discussions began about the morality of keeping such beings in isolation, about humanity's role in protecting life rather than controlling it. One evening, as Kale and the child sat together watching the distant lights of a nearby starfield through a viewport, the child reached up and touched Kale's face gently. Its luminescent patterns shifted softly, like a silent smile. Kale smiled back, feeling a deep, unspoken understanding. It was a simple moment, yet profound, a bridge forming between two beings from entirely different worlds. The guards' patrols grew more frequent, and whispers of the missing child spread among the station officials. Kale knew their time in hiding could not last forever. He needed to find a solution, a way to protect the child from authorities and help it return to safety. The thought weighed heavily on him, but he refused to show fear. The child depended on him, and he would not fail. As night fell, Kale held the child close, feeling its tiny heartbeat against his chest. He whispered promises of safety and hope, and though the child could not speak fully in human words, it responded with a quiet hum, a soft rhythm of trust and gratitude. In that moment, Kale realized something extraordinary. This small, fragile being had already begun to change him. It reminded him that compassion, courage, and empathy were far more powerful than any rule or weapon in the station. And so, Kale vowed silently, as the lights of Aurora Prime flickered and hummed around them, that no matter the danger, he would protect this child. Not just because it was alone or because it needed help, but because in its eyes he saw the best of what humanity could be. He saw hope, connection, and the chance to bridge the vast gulf between species with nothing more than kindness and courage. The corridor outside hummed with life and authority, but inside that quiet room, a small alien child rested against a human's chest, finally feeling safe. And for the first time, Kale allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, one act of care could change everything. Kale woke before the station's artificial sun rose, careful not to disturb the alien child curled against his chest. Its breathing was soft and steady, a tiny glow pulsing gently across its skin. Kale had grown used to the patterns by now, soft waves that shifted with its mood, signaling calm, curiosity, or fear. This morning the glow was steady and serene. Kale smiled quietly. The child seemed safer here than anywhere else on the station, yet Kale knew that safety was fragile. He rose slowly and tiptoed to the small corner where he had stored food and water. Aurora Prime had markets and stations that sold provisions to travelers, and Kale had learned to bring enough for both of them without drawing attention. He returned to the child with a small tray of food, soft protein cubes, a few fruit gels, and purified water. The child stirred, blinking slowly, its eyes adjusting to the light. When it saw the food, it reached out, tiny hands trembling, and accepted it without hesitation. Kale watched as it ate quietly, careful and deliberate. Even in its small movements, there was an intelligence that suggested survival had been hard won. Kale wondered what kind of life the child had led before arriving here. "Do you remember your home?" Kale asked softly, sitting beside it and keeping his voice low. The child paused mid-bite, then shook its head. Its glow dimmed slightly, a subtle sign of sadness. Kale sighed softly. He could imagine the pain of losing a home, a family, and an entire world you once knew. The child's small body trembled again, not from cold, but from memory. Kale placed a gentle hand on its shoulder, offering reassurance. "You're safe now," he said. "I won't let anyone hurt you." For a moment, the child simply rested against him, small luminescent patterns flickering across its skin like tiny waves. Kale felt a mix of protectiveness and awe. It was remarkable that such a fragile-looking creature carried so much intelligence and emotion. He realized the child could survive alone, but it was far too young to navigate a station full of humans and security protocols. As they ate, Kale listened carefully for sounds outside the room. The station was alive with noise, the distant hum of engines, conversations in alien tongues, and the occasional clatter of machinery. The guards would be searching eventually, and Kale knew he could not hide forever. He needed a plan. After breakfast, he led the child to a small maintenance corridor, quieter than the main halls. He showed it how to move carefully, avoiding patrols, and how to read human patterns, when doors opened, when alarms were likely, when guards were distracted. The child watched him closely, learning quickly. Its luminescent patterns shifted rapidly, suggesting excitement and understanding. Kale smiled. "You're a fast learner," he said. "We'll need that if we want to stay safe." The child made a soft, humming sound in response. Kale wasn't sure if it was agreement or amusement, but he took it as a good sign. Together, they explored the less crowded sections of the station. Kale pointed out storage rooms, unused maintenance bays, and other quiet corners where they could rest if needed. The child followed, small feet moving silently, eyes wide and alert. As the day passed, Kale noticed something extraordinary. The child could sense things he could not. When a patrol approached from a side corridor, the child twitched slightly, patterns flashing on its skin like warning lights. Kale followed its subtle cues and hid behind a supply crate just before the guards passed. The child's senses were extraordinary, and Kale realized they had an unexpected advantage. Later, as they rested in a hidden alcove, the child began to hum again, louder this time. Kale leaned closer, curious. The sound was melodic, almost like a song, and it seemed to carry meaning. Patterns of light rippled across its skin, forming shapes that Kale could not understand but felt as communication. He reached out and gently touched its hand. "You're trying to tell me something, aren't you?" he asked. The child's eyes brightened slightly, and the glow spread in a slow wave across its small body. Kale realized it was sharing information about the station, paths, obstacles, and even small risks he might have missed. The bond between them deepened, a silent understanding forming without words. Kale felt a sense of pride and admiration. The child was not just surviving, it was intelligent, clever, and capable. By midday, Kale decided they needed supplies. They had enough food for a few days, but they could not rely on hiding forever. He led the child to a small market in a quieter sector of the station. They moved cautiously, weaving through crowds of humans and aliens alike. Kale kept his arm around the child, a shield against accidental bumps or prying eyes. In the market, the child's wide eyes took in the sights. Strange foods, colorful lights, and alien gadgets filled every stall. Kale selected what they needed: water, food, and a few small comfort items. The child watched him carefully, glowing softly as if processing everything around it. Kale wondered what it thought of the human world, and if it felt fear, curiosity, or wonder, or all three at once. On their way back, a small group of curious station dwellers noticed the child. Whispers followed them down the corridor. Kale felt the tension rise. Some humans were kind, others cautious, and a few openly suspicious. He kept moving, ignoring the whispers, and the child clung tightly to him. When they reached their hiding spot, Kale sat down and offered the child a small piece of fruit gel. The child accepted it happily, and Kale watched as it ate, relieved. "We're doing well," he said. "But we can't stay hidden forever. We need a long-term plan." The child tilted its head, and patterns glowed softly across its skin. Kale took it as encouragement. Together, they brainstormed possibilities. Kale thought of diplomats, scientists, or anyone on the station who might help them. He also considered leaving the station, but the child's small size and fragility made travel risky. That evening, the station shifted into night mode. Lights dimmed, engines hummed quieter, and the corridors emptied. Kale and the child sat by a viewport, looking out at the distant stars. The child rested its head on Kale's shoulder, glowing softly in the dim light. Kale realized that this small being had changed him. It was teaching him patience, empathy, and courage, the very qualities that made humans remarkable. Suddenly, the child's glow brightened sharply. Kale followed its gaze to a patrol heading toward their location. He froze for a moment, calculating. The child's patterns shifted in rapid pulses, signaling urgency. Kale nodded, understanding instantly. They needed to move quietly and quickly. He guided the child down an alternative path he had discovered earlier. They moved like shadows, silent and careful. Kale relied on the child's cues as much as his own knowledge. They slipped past guards, avoided surveillance cameras, and found a narrow ventilation shaft leading to a safe corner of the station. The child's small size made it easy for them to navigate the confined space. Kale marveled at how intelligent it was, sensing danger before he could. When they finally reached safety, Kale let out a quiet sigh of relief. The child curled against him again, exhausted but safe. He stroked its back gently, whispering, "You were amazing. We make a good team." The child hummed softly, the glow fading to a calm, steady light. Kale knew this was only the beginning. Station officials would intensify their search, and the guards would not give up easily. But Kale also knew that they had an advantage: the child's intelligence, their bond, and the compassion that guided every decision he made. Over the next few days, Kale and the child continued their careful routines. They moved only when necessary, avoiding crowded areas and patrolling guards. Kale taught the child simple words in basic human language, and the child began to mimic them, though its voice remained soft and musical. Their communication deepened, blending words, gestures, and glowing patterns into a rich and nuanced understanding. Kale also discovered the child had a remarkable memory and could remember paths, layouts, and even the timing of patrols after seeing them only once. The realization struck him: this small being was not helpless. It was extraordinary, capable of navigating a human-dominated station with intuition and intelligence far beyond its apparent age or size. One evening, as they rested in a hidden alcove, the child shifted and looked at Kale with something new in its eyes: trust, admiration, and perhaps a sense of hope. Its luminescent patterns shimmered brightly, forming shapes that Kale could not interpret but felt profoundly. He reached out and held its tiny hands gently. "We'll find a way," he said. "I promise, no one will hurt you, not while I'm here." The child hummed in response, a soft melody that seemed to carry relief, joy, and a tiny spark of curiosity about the future. Kale smiled, feeling a deep sense of purpose. Protecting this child was not just about hiding from danger. It was about nurturing the potential for understanding and compassion between species. As the artificial night deepened, Kale held the child close and watched the stars beyond the viewport. He imagined a future where humans and aliens could coexist peacefully, where empathy and courage could overcome fear and suspicion. The child's small presence reminded him that even one act of care could ripple outward, changing hearts and minds. Kale whispered softly, "You're not alone anymore. We'll face whatever comes together." The child's soft hum answered him, a quiet affirmation. In the vast, metallic corridors of Aurora Prime, amid the bustle of countless beings, a fragile bond had formed, one that would defy fear, rules, and distance. It was a bond built on trust, kindness, and the courage to care, and Kale knew it would carry them through the challenges ahead. The days on Aurora Prime passed in a tense rhythm. Kale and the alien child had settled into a careful routine, balancing the need to stay hidden with the slow gathering of supplies. But the station was a living maze, full of unpredictability, and Kale knew it was only a matter of time before the authorities intensified their search. The child had grown more confident with each passing day. Its small hands now moved with surety, its glowing patterns communicating thoughts, warnings, and even small observations. Kale noticed that sometimes the child would pause in the middle of a corridor, seemingly sensing something invisible: a patrol about to turn a corner, a drone about to sweep an area. Its intuition was remarkable, almost as if it could feel the heartbeat of the station itself. One afternoon, Kale and the child were moving through a lesser-used maintenance sector when a sudden alarm blared through the station. Red lights flashed along the corridors, and the distant hum of security drones grew louder. Kale froze, his heart racing. They had been careful, but some patrols were unpredictable, and it seemed they had triggered a sensor. The child's patterns glowed violently, a mix of warning and urgency. Kale felt the tiny hands grip his arm. "We need to move," it seemed to say without words. Kale nodded, his mind racing. They had explored most of the quiet paths, but he remembered a narrow ventilation shaft near the old docking bay, a place few humans ever went. He led the child there, sliding into the shaft just as security drones passed the corridor. Inside the cramped metal tunnel, Kale pressed the child close. Its body was small enough to slip into corners where he could not, allowing them to advance without making noise. The child's glowing patterns shifted in complex waves, almost as if it was mapping the path ahead. Kale realized that, in many ways, the child was not just a passenger. It was guiding him, making them safer than he could have been alone. Emerging from the ventilation shaft, they found themselves in a dimly lit storage area filled with crates and containers. Kale let out a sigh of relief and sat down, the child curling into his lap as it had done so many times before. He stroked its back gently, grateful for its presence. Even in danger, the child remained a source of calm and focus. "We'll figure this out," Kale whispered. "We always do." Over the next several days, Kale began to notice other humans watching them. Not guards, but curious station dwellers who had glimpsed the child's glow, its small figure, and the way it seemed to trust Kale completely. Some observed from a distance, whispering to each other, while others discreetly offered small gestures, extra food, a safe place to rest, or a quiet warning of patrols. Kale was careful, but he realized that the child's presence was beginning to touch more people than he imagined. One evening, a sympathetic station engineer named Lyra approached them cautiously. She had been watching them for days, intrigued by the child's intelligence and by Kale's protective care. "I can help," she said softly, keeping her voice low. "I know a place where no one will find you. It's an old observation deck, unused for years. I can get you there if you want." Kale hesitated, unsure if he could trust anyone, but he glanced at the child. Its glow shifted with interest, a silent question of whether this new human was a friend. After a moment, Kale nodded. "All right," he said. "Let's go." With Lyra's guidance, they navigated the station's labyrinthine corridors, avoiding patrols and cameras. The child moved beside Kale, small hands gripping his arm when the path became narrow or dangerous. Its glowing patterns flickered in soft waves, communicating calm and confidence. For Kale, it was both reassuring and humbling. He realized that the child's perception of the world was far more advanced than most humans gave it credit for. When they reached the observation deck, it was quiet and abandoned. Dust covered the floor, and old equipment lined the walls, but it had a panoramic view of the stars beyond the station. Kale and the child stood near the viewport, looking out at the glowing expanse of space. The child hummed softly, its glow reflecting the stars. Kale knelt beside it. "This is your home for now," he said gently. "We'll be safe here. You can rest, and we can plan the next step." The child's small hands reached up and touched Kale's face lightly. Its glow rippled in gentle waves, a silent thank you. Kale smiled, feeling a surge of warmth. It was incredible to think that such a tiny being could communicate so profoundly without words. He realized again that empathy, understanding, and care were more powerful than any weapon or rule. But peace was short-lived. A distant explosion shook the station, followed by an urgent alarm. Kale felt the child stiffen against him, patterns flashing in rapid pulses of fear and warning. He knew immediately that this was no ordinary security check. Something serious was happening, something that could endanger everyone on the station. Kale and the child moved quickly, following hidden corridors to stay ahead of the chaos. Lyra stayed behind, ensuring they would not be tracked directly. As they navigated the maze-like passages, Kale noticed that the child seemed to sense not just immediate dangers, but patterns in the station itself. Routes of patrols, movement of security drones, and even subtle shifts in the station's power grid. It was almost as if the child could predict what would happen next. They reached a small maintenance room and hid inside. Kale pressed the child to his chest, holding it close as alarms blared in the distance. The glow from its skin pulsed rapidly, a combination of fear and anticipation. Kale whispered softly, "Stay calm, we'll get through this." The child responded with a soft hum, its glow gradually stabilizing as it focused. Kale watched in amazement as it seemed to manipulate its perception, sensing paths and weaknesses in the station's security. He realized that their survival depended not just on his actions, but on the child's intuition and intelligence. Over the next few hours, they moved carefully, using the child's guidance to avoid drones, guards, and damaged areas of the station. Kale marveled at its abilities. Each decision was informed by subtle shifts in its glowing patterns, tiny gestures, and soft hums. It was extraordinary how such a small creature could influence their path and safety with such precision. Finally, they reached a quiet sector far from the alarms. The child rested against Kale, exhausted but alert. Kale offered water and food, and the child accepted gratefully, its glow dimming to a steady, calm rhythm. Kale could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him, but he also felt a deep sense of connection. He was not alone in protecting this child. Together, they had formed a partnership built on trust, intelligence, and empathy. As the station quieted down, Kale reflected on how much the child had changed him. Its presence reminded him that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Its intelligence and perception challenged him to think differently, to rely on more than just human instincts, and its trust in him inspired him to protect it with every resource at his disposal. Kale realized that the authorities would not give up easily. The station was vast, but eventually they would tighten their search, and the child's uniqueness would draw attention. He began to plan long-term solutions, finding allies among sympathetic humans, understanding the child's species better, and eventually, if possible, returning the child to its own kind. The child shifted in his arms, glowing softly in contentment. It had learned to trust him completely, and Kale knew that the bond they shared was extraordinary. It was not just survival, it was a connection that transcended species, language, and culture. He whispered to it, "No matter what happens, we face it together. I promise." Over the next days, Kale and the child continued to explore hidden areas of the station, learning its patterns and weaknesses. The child's glowing patterns became more complex, almost like a language Kale could begin to understand through intuition. It warned him of dangers, suggested safer paths, and even reacted to subtle changes in the station's environment. One evening, as they rested in the observation deck, Kale realized the child was not only capable of survival, but also remarkable in its intelligence and creativity. It began experimenting with small objects, stacking containers, arranging items in patterns that seemed purposeful. Kale watched, fascinated, realizing that this small being had potential far beyond what anyone could have imagined. It dawned on him that this child could become a bridge between species, an example of what empathy, intelligence, and courage could accomplish when nurtured. Humanity often thought of aliens as threats or curiosities, but here was proof that even a small, fragile being could teach humans about trust, understanding, and partnership. The bond between Kale and the child grew deeper every day. The child's reliance on him was matched by Kale's reliance on its instincts. They had become partners, navigating dangers together, learning from each other, and inspiring hope that kindness and intelligence could overcome fear and suspicion. As night settled over the station, Kale held the child close, staring out at the stars beyond the viewport. He felt a renewed determination. No matter what the authorities did, no matter how dangerous the station became, he would protect this child. Its life, its intelligence, and its potential for bridging worlds were worth every risk. The child hummed softly, resting its tiny head against his chest. Its glow pulsed gently, a rhythm that Kale had come to understand as calm, trust, and quiet joy. In that moment, Kale knew that they had created something rare and precious, a bond that defied fear, rules, and prejudice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Kale felt ready. Together, they had survived alarms, patrols, and the chaos of the station. Together, they had formed a connection that was stronger than any obstacle. And Kale understood something profound. In protecting this child, he was not just saving a life. He was nurturing hope, understanding, and the very best of what humanity could offer to the universe. The station had quieted into a tense stillness, though Kale knew the peace was fragile. Aurora Prime hummed softly, Lights dimmed in corridors and distant engines thrummed with a low rhythm. The child rested in his arms, small and delicate, its glow a calm pulse that reflected trust and comfort. Cale had grown accustomed to these quiet moments, but he knew they could not last forever. The authorities would intensify their search, and the station's rules would not allow such a unique being to remain hidden indefinitely. Cale had been planning. He needed a solution that would protect the child while ensuring it could one day return to its own kind. He thought of diplomats, scientists, and sympathetic humans he had encountered over the past days. One name came to mind, Ambassador Tessa, a human diplomat known for advocating peaceful relations between species. If anyone could help, it was her. Before approaching her, Cale needed to ensure their immediate safety. He moved through hidden corridors, the child clinging to him, tiny hands wrapped around his arm. Its glow was steady, but Cale could sense a faint worry. He whispered to it, "We're going to be safe." "I promise." The child responded with a soft hum, a melodic vibration that Cale had come to understand as agreement and trust. Finding a private access route, they reached the diplomat's sector. Cale hesitated outside the large, imposing door of Ambassador Tessa's office. He knocked lightly, unsure of how she would react. The door opened almost immediately, and Tessa's sharp, curious eyes examined them. Cale stepped forward, the child tucked securely against him. "Ambassador Tessa," he said, voice calm but firm, "I need your help." "This child," he paused, unsure how to describe the alien without sounding alarmist. "It needs protection. It is intelligent, fragile, and alone. I cannot keep it safe on my own." Tessa regarded them quietly, the child's faint glow catching her attention. Her expression softened as she looked at the small being nestled against Cale. "I see," she said finally. "Bring it inside. We will speak privately." Cale entered cautiously, placing the child on a soft surface prepared in the corner of the office. The child's glow pulsed nervously, but it seemed to sense Cale's continued presence and relaxed slightly. Tessa knelt down, examining the child with curiosity and care. "This is extraordinary," she said softly. "Its intelligence, its communication. I have seen reports of the crash, but I did not realize the survivor was capable of this level of understanding." Cale nodded. "It has survived alone until now. It trusts humans very little except me. I believe it could be a bridge between our species if given the chance, but it needs protection. The authorities will not understand its value." Tessa considered this. "You are right," she said after a moment. "We must act carefully. This child could be more important than we realize, not just for its species, but for humanity's role in the galaxy. We will ensure its safety." Over the next hours, Cale, Tessa, and a small team of trusted aides devised a plan. The child would be placed in a secure, undisclosed location within the station, while officials from its species were contacted. Tessa arranged discreet communications with alien representatives stationed nearby. The goal was simple: reunite the child with its people safely, without provoking fear or conflict among humans or aliens on the station. The child observed the preparations quietly, its small hands occasionally reaching out to Cale. Its glow shifted softly, patterns rippling with curiosity and uncertainty. Cale smiled and whispered reassuring words. "Everything will be fine, you will be safe, and you will meet your kind again." The day of the transfer arrived. Cale carried the child through a maze of secure corridors, escorted by Tessa's aides. The child's small hands gripped his shirt tightly, luminescent patterns brightening with nervous energy. Cale whispered soft encouragements, his heart aching at the thought of letting the child go. Finally, they reached a large docking bay. A small vessel waited, designed for safe transport of alien beings. Representatives of the child's species were present, cautious but clearly overjoyed to see the survivor. The child hesitated for a moment, looking up at Cale with wide, trusting eyes. Its glow rippled in complex patterns, a silent question, a farewell, a thank you. Cale knelt beside the child, holding it close. "You'll be okay," he said softly. "I'll never forget you, and I'll tell others about you. You're remarkable." The child hummed in response, a melodic vibration that Cale felt in his chest. Then, with a small, trembling movement, it stepped into the waiting arms of its own kind. Its glow remained bright, a signal of trust and reassurance, even as it left Cale's embrace. Cale watched as the child was carefully secured in the vessel. He felt a mixture of sadness and pride. Sadness because their time together had come to an end, and pride because he had been able to protect and nurture such an extraordinary being. He realized that his actions, small and courageous as they seemed, had changed not just the child's life but perhaps the future of human-alien relations. As the vessel lifted off, Cale turned back toward the station. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that he had done what he could. The child's survival, its intelligence, and its trust in humans had been preserved. In the coming days, he knew others would hear of the story of a human who had risked everything to protect a small, fragile alien child. It was a story of empathy, courage, and the best qualities of humanity. Cale spent the following weeks reflecting on their journey. Station life resumed its normal rhythm, but he carried with him the memory of the child's glowing patterns, its melodic hums, and the moments they had shared. He realized that heroism did not always come from battles or victories over enemies. Sometimes it came from small acts of kindness, from choosing to protect life, and from forming bonds across impossible divides. In quiet moments, Cale would stand at the same observation deck where he had first watched the stars with the child. He would imagine it resting safely among its people, learning, growing, and perhaps remembering him as fondly as he remembered it. The universe was vast, filled with countless stars and civilizations, yet in his heart, Cale felt that one small bond had made it a little brighter, a little more connected, and a little more hopeful. He thought of the lessons the child had taught him: patience, trust, courage, and the importance of seeing the world through others' eyes. Humanity often saw alien beings as threats, as curiosities, or as problems to be solved. But the child had shown him something more profound: compassion, intelligence, and the potential for unity across species. Word of Cale's actions spread quietly through the station. Some admired his courage, some questioned his decisions, but all who learned of the child's survival began to reconsider what it meant to interact with alien life. Policies and attitudes slowly shifted, influenced by the story of a human who had chosen empathy over fear. Cale's small act of care rippled outward, changing perceptions in ways he had not imagined. One evening, months later, Cale received a message from Ambassador Tessa. The child had been reunited with a small community of its species and was thriving. It had learned, adapted, and continued to display remarkable intelligence. And in a small gesture of recognition, it had requested to maintain contact with humans, an unprecedented act of trust and collaboration. Cale smiled as he read the message. The memory of the child's glowing patterns and soft hums returned vividly. He could almost feel its small hands on his chest, the warmth of its trust, and the extraordinary bond they had shared. The universe was vast and full of uncertainty, but he understood now that even a single act of courage and care could shape the future. He stood once more at the observation deck, looking out at the stars beyond Aurora Prime. The lights of distant planets and far-off civilizations shimmered in the dark expanse. Cale felt a quiet hope. Somewhere out there, the child was alive, safe, and thriving. And somewhere, humans and aliens would continue to learn from each other, building bridges of understanding across the stars. Cale whispered to the empty room, a private vow to himself: "I will never forget you. I will always fight for the small, the fragile, and the extraordinary. And I will always remember that courage is not just in battle. It is in empathy, kindness, and trust." The station hummed softly around him, alive with countless stories and lives. Cale knew that his story with the child had changed him forever. In the vastness of space, among countless stars and civilizations, he had discovered the true strength of humanity. Not weapons, not technology, but compassion, courage, and the willingness to protect life in all its forms. And somewhere among the distant stars, the small alien child glowed softly, safe and thriving, carrying with it the memory of a human who had chosen to believe in the best of what both species could be. Cale turned back toward the station's corridors, ready for the future, strengthened by the past, and inspired by the extraordinary bond he had shared. The universe was wide and uncertain, but he knew now that even the smallest acts of kindness could light a path across the darkness, guiding others toward hope, trust, and understanding. And in that knowledge, Cale felt truly at peace.